We are going to import this spreadsheet into Lexchart to automatically create the organizational structure of Delta Airlines in this example. So this spreadsheet brings together data from Delta Airlines proxy statement where they list the beneficial owners, the directors, named officers, and outside investors, the Vanguard Group and BlackRock, and Exhibit 21 of Delta Airlines 10K where they list the significant subsidiaries and their jurisdictions. So we've pulled those two pieces of information together on this single spreadsheet. Now we want to actually create the entire structure along with the data. So the first column will have the parent entity that we're going to list here, and then we have the subsidiary. So we're asking Lexchart to create a connection between the Vanguard Group and Delta Airlines and BlackRock and Delta Airlines. Lexchart's going to take all of that data and create just the right chart for us. For purposes of this presentation, we are not going to import all of the individual directors, although we certainly could do that. Instead, we're just going to have a single box for the directors because none of them has more than 1% voting interest. We've also moved the CEO down to the executive officers, and we are going to import all of the individual officers here, which is what you see going on here. But I want to create an informal group of officers. So I'm going to say that each of these officers has a parent relationship to this group called officers, and we'll show that in more detail. But those officers then have a parent subsidiary relationship with Delta Airlines proper. So I want the officers above Delta Airlines on the chart as well as the directors box too. And so the same thing, Delta Airlines is the parent of all of these entities. We've done some informal grouping of the subsidiaries as well. So you'll see that Delta Airlines has a subsidiary called SkyMiles, which is just an informal grouping we created to collect these four entities together. This is not necessarily how these entities are legally structured in fact, or even how Delta Airlines thinks of them from a business perspective. It's just for purposes of clarity on the chart and showing how this grouping function works on the import. These other columns all contain information about our chart that we also want to import. So in the jurisdiction column here, we want to get the jurisdiction of the subsidiaries, the right-hand column here. So we'll have, Aero Assurances incorporated in Vermont according to the Exhibit 21 and so on. We want to get all of that information in these boxes. We have this roll column, and that's mostly here because we're going to ignore it. So I want to show you what that's like to ignore some data on your spreadsheet. So your spreadsheet does not have to be perfect. You can just start and then ignore certain columns. We have the title. This is going to be the information in the parent entity. So remember, we have all the individual officers as parents, and we're going to add their titles into the chart. And then finally, we have some link data. So we have shares, the number of shares for each of these parties here. And we have the percentage ownership on a couple of them because it's more than what is regulatorily required or what Delta Airlines is displaying in their 10K and proxy statements. So that's our spreadsheet. Notice that it's kind of a dirty bit of data. So there are lots of missing cells. Some rows have only one element of additional data. Some have more than one. And Lexchart's just going to handle all of that really easily. So we've saved it as a CSV. So there are two things you should know about the spreadsheet itself. First is you need to save it as a CSV. Excel and Google Sheets, all the spreadsheet applications have a save as a comma delimited file format. The second thing is there's only a single header row here. So you'll want to remove any additional header rows that you have in your spreadsheet and keep it pretty straightforward from that perspective. Just a single header row and then all of your data underneath it. So with that preface and explanation, let's go over to Lexchart import. And Lexchart's going to say, well, let's go pick your file. So we're going to choose a file and we're going to say Delta Airlines new and upload. Now, Lexchart is giving us an opportunity to interact with our spreadsheet and tell it where the data should go. So here we have our labels from that header row we just imported and then all of the data that we just talked through. Here are where we can make the assignments. So we have 5 choices. We can say this column is parent, or child, or data about the parent, data about the child, or data about the connection between the two, or the link. So we already know this is our parent information, and these are all of our subsidiaries. So we're going to say this is child information. These are the children of these parents here. And we have data about the children. So remember, this jurisdiction information applies to the subsidiaries only there. And we're going to ignore the role. So you have several options, and we're just going to choose ignore, and Lexchart is going to skip these executive assignments here. And we've got data about the parents, so these titles will apply to these individuals here. And then we have link data. So this share information is information we want on the link, the line between the Vanguard Group and Delta Airlines. And same with the percentage information. Now notice that in some cases we have shares, which will be link data, but no percent. So Lexchart is just going to handle that. It's going to display both of these values on the line for Vanguard and BlackRock, but only one element for these individual officers here. And that's all of our data there. So we select import. And we have our chart. I'm going to make a few quick adjustments just to make it a little more readable and talk through what Lexchart has done. The first thing I'm going to do is switch to elbow lines, just to clean up some of that distraction, although the curved lines are really useful in many cases. And I'm going to turn off the wrapping. It'll make our boxes a little longer or wider and shorter, but it'll just be a little easier to talk through them. And let's expand the gap a little bit so we can see these labels clearly. So here we have our basic chart. I'll take that down one notch again. Perfect. So I want to point out that we had those groupings we were talking about. So Sky Miles, Energy, and Services, again, not legal entities, but they are collections of entities that we just added for illustration. So this might be a business segment or division, department in your chart, but in this case, it's just showing how you can use these groupings to collect these entities together. And you'll notice that we have line data. So here's BlackRock as an example, and its share information, both its percent and shares, are listed there. So we can make some additional formatting changes really quickly, but in essence, we have finished. We have a chart that's imported, but let's make a few visual changes just quickly. So the first thing I want to do is select all of the cards, and I'm just going to left justify for a little bit more modern look on all of these things. Except I don't want to do that for my collections of other entities. So we'll go back here. The other thing is I don't want them to appear like they are entities. So I want to remove their border. So I'm simply going to make the border white. I could make it transparent as well. But there now it's a little bit clear that these are just collections of entities. And maybe for Delta Airlines, I want to highlight it since it's the focus of our chart in this particular example, and we'll just make it blue and its text white, and we'll make its border blue as well. And again, we could do a lot more, but in essence, we've created the structure with the import. You could also move many of the link note elements or change them in a variety of ways. So let's select all of those link notes. So a link note is the text related to the line. The link here is the line itself. So we want to select those link notes. And the first thing I like to do is switch the direction so that in cases like this, the number of shares is on the left. And we've done that. And what I want to point out here too, in the BlackRock and Vanguard instance, you'll notice that the alignment is left aligned on those values. So let's imagine there were multiple rows of shares or voting units or what have you. You might prefer right alignment on that data. So here's how you would do that. Select. We're going to choose data, and we're just going to make that right aligned. And now the shares and the percent are lined up correctly on those two elements. Now we also see that it's not entirely clear which of these lines this data applies to. Let's actually make all of those link notes bigger. There we go, a little more readable. But they're not in a great position. So Lexchart will do its best to place the link notes where they're readable, but often they require some adjustment. So we're just going to switch to manual mode, and we're just going to put them where we think they will be a little more readable. And now all of our link notes are clearly associated with the entity that they are aligned with, and that will jump out in the case where we make the lines curved, and we can see that effect, or if we prefer, stick with the elbow connectors. And of course, we want to give our chart a name. We're done with that import.